The words still echo in my head. "You're no longer my mother." My daughter said them without crying, without shouting, almost as if she had rehearsed them. I stood in her kitchen holding a birthday cake I had made for her. 60 years old. That was my daughter. The little girl who used to hold my hand whenever she was afraid of thunderstorms. The teenager who called me every night after her first heartbreak. The woman I had stayed awake for countless nights worrying about. And now she was standing 3 feet away from me, telling me I was no longer her mother. I put the cake down. "Why?" She wouldn't look at me. "Because you lied to me." My heart sank. "I never lied to you." "Yes, you did." "About what?" She finally looked at me. Her eyes were filled with anger and something else I couldn't understand. Disappointment. "You know exactly what you did." "I don't." She shook her head. "I don't want to hear another explanation." Then she opened the front door. "Please leave." I couldn't move. "Emma." "Mom, please." That one word almost broke me. Mom. She had just said I wasn't her mother. Yet she still called me Mom. I walked outside. The door closed behind me. I stood on her porch for several seconds. Then I walked to my car. I didn't cry until I reached home. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table. The birthday cake was still in my car. I couldn't bring myself to take it inside. I kept asking myself the same question. What had I done? 3 weeks earlier, everything had been normal. Emma had invited me to her house for dinner. We talked about ordinary things. Her work, her husband, their new plans. She even showed me photographs from a recent vacation. Nothing seemed wrong. Then, almost overnight, she stopped answering my calls. My messages went unread. When I finally asked her husband what was happening, he told me she needed space. I gave her space. For 2 weeks. Then came her birthday. I thought showing up with her favorite cake might remind her that I loved her. Instead, I left her house feeling like a stranger. That night I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I heard something outside. At first I thought it was the wind. Then I heard a knock. I walked toward the front door. Nobody was there. But something had been left on the porch. A small white envelope. My name was written across it. Mom! I froze. I picked it up. There was no return address. No stamp. Nothing else. I took it inside. For several minutes, I simply stared at it. My hands were trembling. Why would Emma leave me a letter after telling me she never wanted to see me again? I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The first sentence made my heart stop. Mom, if you're reading this, I've already done what I promised myself I would never do. I read it again, then again. The next line was even more confusing. I had to make you hate me because I needed you to stay away. I sat down. Stay away from what? The letter continued. There is something Dad never told you. My breathing became shallow. My husband had been dead for 8 years. What could he possibly have hidden from me? I kept reading. Everything you believe about what happened 8 years ago is wrong. I stopped. 8 years ago. The year my husband died. The year our family changed forever. The year Emma moved away. I remembered that time clearly. Or at least, I thought I did. The letter said, "You believed Dad died because of his illness." I stared at those words. Yes, that was what the doctors had told us. That was what the family had accepted. But then came the sentence that changed everything. He didn't. My hands went cold. I read the sentence again. Dad's death was connected to a secret he was trying to protect. I couldn't breathe for a moment. What secret? And why had Emma waited 8 years to tell me? Then I reached the final paragraph. Contained only 3 sentences. Don't call me. Don't come to my house. And whatever you do, don't trust Uncle David. I dropped the letter. Uncle David. My husband's younger brother. The man who had stood beside me at my husband's funeral. The man who had helped us with everything after his death. The man I had trusted for 8 years. I picked up the letter again. There was one final line written at the bottom. If you want to know why I abandoned you, look inside Dad's old desk. I knew exactly which desk she meant. My husband's study. A room I hadn't entered properly in years. And suddenly, I was afraid to open that door. I stood outside my husband's study for almost 10 minutes. I hadn't opened that door in years. Not properly. I had dusted the room, changed the curtains, cleaned the shelves, but I had never touched his desk. It still looked exactly as he had left it. His old reading glasses sat beside a dried-up pen. A small notebook was tucked beneath a stack of papers. And on the corner of the desk was the photograph of our family from Emma's graduation. I picked it up. Emma was smiling. My husband was standing beside her, and I was between them. We looked happy. I whispered, "What happened to us?" Then I remembered her letter. Look inside Dad's old desk. I pulled open the first drawer. Nothing. The second drawer contained old receipts. The third was locked. I stared at it. My husband had always kept that drawer locked. I had never asked why. I searched the desk. No key. Then I remembered something. His old desk lamp had a tiny brass base. When I lifted it, I found a small key taped underneath. My heart started beating faster. I inserted it into the lock. The drawer opened. Inside was a brown envelope. My name was written on it. Eleanor. I almost dropped it. Why would my husband leave something addressed to me inside a locked drawer? I opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph. It showed my husband standing outside a building I didn't recognize. Beside him was Uncle David. But they weren't alone. There was a third person. A woman. I didn't know her. I turned the photograph over. There was a date. 8 years ago. The exact year my husband died. Under the date were 5 words. David knows who she is. I sat down. My hands were shaking. Who was this woman? And why had my husband written David's name? I searched the envelope again. There was another piece of paper. It was a handwritten note. My husband's handwriting. I recognized it immediately. It said, "If anything happens to me, don't let David control the story." I stopped breathing. Control the story? What story? I read the note again. Then I noticed something written underneath. Eleanor deserves the truth. Tears filled my eyes. My husband had known something was wrong, and he had been trying to protect me. But why hadn't he told me? I searched the drawer again. At the very bottom was a small USB drive. I picked it up. There was a label attached to it. For Emma. My daughter's name. I stared at it for several seconds. Emma had known about this. Maybe that's why she had pushed me away. Maybe she wasn't angry with me. Maybe she was afraid. I grabbed my laptop. I connected the drive. There were only 3 files. The first was a photograph. The second was a scanned document. The third was a video. I opened the document first. It was a bank statement. My husband's name was on it. But there was something strange. For several months before his death, money had been transferred from his account into another account. I didn't recognize the account number. Then I saw the name attached to it. David Carter. My husband's brother. I stared at the screen. Thousands of dollars. Transferred over several months. I whispered, "No." There had to be an explanation. I opened the second file. It was a copy of a legal document. At the top was my husband's name, and below it was something I had never seen before. A life insurance policy. But the beneficiary wasn't me. It wasn't Emma. It wasn't anyone in our immediate family. The beneficiary was a company I had never heard of. My heart began racing. Why would my husband put a company on his life insurance? Then I opened the video. It was recorded in my husband's study. He was sitting behind the same desk where I was sitting now. He looked tired, serious, and afraid. He looked directly into the camera. "Eleanor, if you're watching this, something went wrong." Covered my mouth. His voice. After 8 years, I was hearing his voice again. He continued, "I didn't tell you because I thought I could fix it myself." He paused. "David made a mistake." My heart stopped. Not the kind of mistake you forgive easily. I leaned closer to the screen. My husband looked directly into the camera. "Eleanor, I need you to understand something." He took a breath. "The money wasn't mine." I froze. "What money?" He continued. "It belonged to someone else." Then the video suddenly ended. I stared at the black screen. There were no more words. No explanation. Nothing. I sat there in silence. Then my phone rang. It was Emma. For the first time in weeks, she was calling me. I answered immediately. "Emma?" There was silence. Then I heard her whisper, "Mom, did you find it?" I looked at the USB drive. "Yes." Her breathing changed. "Then you know." "Know what?" She hesitated. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "Dad didn't die because of his illness." I couldn't speak. Emma continued. "Someone wanted him silent." "Who?" Another pause. Then she whispered, "Uncle David." And before I could ask anything else, the call suddenly disconnected. I immediately called Emma back. No answer. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. I sat there holding my phone, staring at the photograph of my husband and the unknown woman. For 8 years, I had believed my husband's death was simply the tragic end of his illness. Now my daughter was telling me someone had wanted him silent, and she had named David, my husband's own brother. I didn't know what to believe, so I did the only thing I could think of. I went back through the files on the USB drive. The photograph was still open on my laptop. I zoomed in. My husband was standing outside an office building. David stood beside him, and the woman was holding a folder. I looked carefully at the building sign. It was an old financial services company. Then I noticed something written on the folder in the woman's hand. Carter Family Trust. I searched my husband's desk again. Nothing. Then I remembered the old notebook. It had been sitting beneath his reading glasses. I opened it. Most of the pages contained ordinary notes, appointments, phone numbers, reminders. But near the end, I found several pages filled with dates and amounts. The same amounts from the bank statements. I turned the page. There was a name, Margaret Lewis, the woman in the photograph. Under her name, my husband had written, "She knows where the money came from." I sat back. Who was Margaret? And why was my husband meeting her? Then I found a phone number. I hesitated. It had been 8 years. Maybe the number no longer worked. I called anyway. A woman answered. "Hello." I couldn't speak at first. Then I said, "Is this Margaret Lewis?" There was a long silence. "Yes. My name is Eleanor Carter." The silence became even longer. Finally, she asked, "Did David send you?" My heart dropped. "No." "Then why are you calling?" "Because my husband left me your name." She didn't respond. I continued. "He died 8 years ago." "I know." "You knew him?" "Yes." "How?" Another pause. Then Margaret said, "Your husband came to me because he discovered something about your family." "What?" "I can't discuss it over the phone." "Please. I need to see you." "Where?" She gave me an address. Before hanging up, she said, "Come alone." I almost asked why, but I already knew. Someone had been watching this story for years, and I didn't know who I could trust. The next afternoon, I drove to the address. It was a small cafe on the other side of town. Margaret was already sitting inside. She looked older than she did in the photograph. She recognized me immediately. "You look like him." I sat down. "You knew my husband well?" "Yes." "Were you involved with him?" She shook her head. "No, not like that." I waited. She finally opened her bag. Inside was another envelope. She placed it on the table. "This belonged to your husband." I stared at it. "Why didn't you give it to me 8 years ago?" "Because I was afraid." "Of David." She nodded. I opened the envelope. Inside was a copy of a financial agreement. My husband's name was on it. So was David's. And another name. A name I recognized. Emma Carter. My daughter. I looked at Margaret. "Why is my daughter on this?" Margaret took a breath. "Because your husband discovered that someone had been moving money through accounts connected to your family." "And David was involved?" "Yes. But Emma found out." I felt my chest tighten. "When?" "About 6 months before your husband's death." That couldn't be right. Emma had been 24. She had just started her career. Why would she know anything about her father's finances? Margaret continued. "Your husband asked Emma to keep quiet." "Why?" "Because he believed David was capable of hurting the family." I shook my head. "No, David would never." Margaret interrupted gently. "That's what your husband believed too." Then she pulled out another photograph. It showed David entering the same financial office. The date was only 3 days before my husband's death. I looked at Margaret. "What happened after that?" "Your husband planned to report him." My heart sank. "But he never got the chance." "Why?" Margaret looked directly at me. "He became sick very suddenly." I remembered that. My husband had seemed fine. Then, within weeks, his condition had deteriorated. At the time, the doctors said it was an aggressive complication. But now, I wasn't sure anymore. Margaret lowered her voice. "There was another problem." "What?" "Your husband had prepared a second set of documents." "What documents?" "Documents that could expose David." "Where are they?" She looked at me. "Your husband gave them to Emma." Couldn't breathe. "My daughter has them?" "Yes." "Then why didn't she tell me?" Margaret's eyes softened. "Because she was trying to protect you." Suddenly, Emma's behavior made sense. The anger, the distance, the words she had said. "You're no longer my mother." Maybe she had never meant them. Maybe she had been trying to push me away, because she knew something dangerous. I asked Margaret, what exactly was Emma protecting me from? Margaret looked toward the cafe window. Then she whispered, "David believes you still have the original documents." My heart stopped. "What documents?" "The ones your husband used to prove where the money came from." I stared at her. "But I don't have them." Margaret shook her head. "You might." "What do you mean?" "Your husband didn't trust banks anymore." She leaned closer. "He hid the originals somewhere inside your house." I felt a chill run through me. "Where?" Margaret shook her head. "I don't know." Then my phone vibrated. A message from Emma. Only 6 words. "Mom, leave the house tonight." I stared at the screen. Another message arrived. "David knows you found Dad's files." And then a third. "Please trust me this time." I looked up at Margaret. She had seen my expression. "What happened?" I showed her the messages. She immediately stood. "We need to leave." "Why?" "Because if David knows you found the files." She stopped. "What?" Margaret looked toward the cafe entrance. A man had just walked inside. I recognized him instantly. It was David, and he was looking directly at us. The moment I saw David standing at the cafe entrance, my entire body went cold. Margaret grabbed her bag. "Don't look at him." But it was too late. David had already seen me. He walked toward our table slowly. Eleanor. I didn't answer. He smiled. Calm, familiar smile. The same smile he had given me at my husband's funeral. The same smile I had trusted for 8 years. What are you doing here? I looked at him. I could ask you the same thing. His expression changed slightly. Margaret stood. I think we should leave. David looked at her. You've been talking to her. Margaret didn't answer. David turned back toward me. Eleanor, you don't understand what you're getting involved in. I stood. I've already been involved for 8 years. He lowered his voice. Your husband didn't tell you everything. Neither did you. For the first time, his calm expression disappeared. You need to go home. Why? Because this isn't safe. I almost laughed. Safe. I pointed toward him. You're the reason my daughter stopped speaking to me. His eyes narrowed. You don't know what Emma has been told. I know she warned me about you. He looked away. Then he said something unexpected. Emma shouldn't have contacted you. My heart sank. You knew she would? David didn't answer. That was enough. Margaret pulled me toward the door. Come on. We left the cafe. I drove home alone. The entire way, I kept thinking about David's words. Your husband didn't tell you everything. What else had my husband hidden? When I reached home, I didn't turn on the lights. I walked directly into the study. I opened every drawer, every cabinet, every box. Nothing. Then I remembered Margaret's words. Your husband hid the originals somewhere inside your house. I looked around the room. My husband's favorite chair, the bookshelf, the desk, the old cabinet. Then I noticed something strange. One of the bookshelves wasn't sitting completely against the wall. Pushed it. Nothing. I pushed harder. The entire shelf moved slightly. Behind it was a narrow opening. My heart began racing. I reached inside. My fingers touched a small metal box. I pulled it out. It was covered in dust. There was no lock. Inside were documents, bank records, legal agreements, photographs, and one handwritten letter. I opened the letter. It was from my husband. Eleanor, if you found this, then Emma finally told you enough. My eyes filled with tears. I continued reading. I wanted to protect you, but I made one terrible mistake. I stopped. What mistake? Then I read the next line. I trusted David longer than I should have. I sat down. The letter explained everything. My husband had discovered that David had been secretly moving money through a family business. But the money didn't belong to David. It belonged to clients. David had been using the company accounts to hide financial transactions. My husband discovered it. He confronted him. David begged him to stay silent. My husband refused. Then came the part that shocked me most. Emma discovered the truth before I did. My daughter had known. She had found evidence while helping with the family business. My husband asked her to keep quiet while he gathered proof. But David discovered that Emma knew. And he threatened her. Not physically. He threatened her future, her career, her reputation. He told her he could destroy everything she had built if she spoke. Then my husband wrote, I told Emma that when I was gone, she must protect her mother. Covered my mouth. That explained everything. My daughter hadn't abandoned me. She had been trying to protect me. The next page contained something even more disturbing. A list of dates. The first was the day my husband confronted David. The second was the day he changed his will. The third was the day he suddenly became seriously ill. And beside the final date were 3 words. David knows everything. I stared at the page. Then I heard something. A sound from downstairs. Someone had opened my front door. I froze. I hadn't invited anyone. I quietly put the documents back into the box. Then I heard footsteps. Slow. Careful. Coming toward the study. I grabbed the box and stepped behind the door. The footsteps stopped. Someone entered the room. I heard the desk drawer open. Then the cabinets. Someone was searching. I held my breath. Finally, the person whispered, "Where did you put them, Eleanor?" My blood ran cold. It was David. I waited until he walked toward the bookshelf. Then I quietly stepped out through the other door. I ran downstairs. I grabbed my phone. And before leaving the house, I sent one message to Emma. "I found Dad's documents." Her reply came almost immediately. "Don't come home." Then another message appeared. "Go to the police." I stopped. The next message made my hands shake. "Mom, David knows something you don't." I typed, "What?" Her answer arrived seconds later. "Dad didn't leave those documents for you." I stared at the screen. Then another message appeared. "He left them because he knew someone would eventually come looking for them." I looked back toward the house. David was still inside. And suddenly, I realized the truth wasn't just about what happened 8 years ago. It was about what was happening right now. I drove straight to the police station. But before I reached it, my phone rang. "Emma." I answered. "Emma?" Her voice was trembling. "Mom, listen carefully." "Where are you?" "I can't tell you." "Why?" "Because David is looking for me too." My heart dropped. "Where are you?" She whispered. "I'm at the place Dad took me the night before he died." I gripped the steering wheel. "What place?" She hesitated, then said, "The old family cabin." And before the call ended, Emma said something I never expected. "Mom, Dad left something there." "What?" Her voice became barely audible. Proof that he was telling the truth. I drove toward the old family cabin with my heart pounding. It was almost an hour outside town, a place my husband and I hadn't visited in years. When I arrived, Emma was standing outside. The moment she saw me, she ran toward my car. "Mom!" I got out and hugged her. For several seconds, neither of us said anything. Then I pulled back. "Why did you push me away?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Because Dad made me promise." "Promise what?" "That if anything happened to him, I would protect you." I shook my head. "You could have told me." "I tried." "You told me I wasn't your mother." "I know." Her voice broke. I hated myself for saying it. I hugged her again. This time she didn't pull away. Then she looked toward the cabin. "There's something inside." We went in. The cabin hadn't changed much. An old fireplace, a wooden table, a few family photographs. Emma walked toward a cabinet. "Dad brought me here the night before he died." "Why?" "He told me he needed to show me something." She opened a drawer. Inside was an old cassette recorder. I stared at it. "Your father still used those?" "He recorded everything." Emma pressed a button. A voice filled the room. My husband's voice. "If you're hearing this," then I didn't get the chance to finish what I started. Covered my mouth. He continued. "Eleanor doesn't know about the accounts." My heart tightened. I didn't tell her because I was afraid David would use her against me. Emma looked at me. The recording continued. "David has been moving money through the family company. He thinks nobody knows. But I found the records." There was a pause. Then my husband's voice became quieter. "There's one thing I haven't told anyone." Emma looked frightened. I squeezed her hand. The recording continued. "The money wasn't being stolen for David." I stared at the recorder. "What?" My husband's next words changed everything. "David was being blackmailed." Emma looked at me. I could barely breathe. My husband explained that someone had discovered David's financial misconduct and had been threatening him. David had been making payments because he was terrified. But my husband had discovered who was behind it. The recording stopped. Emma pressed play again. My husband's voice returned. The person threatening David is someone close to this family. I froze. Who? The recording continued. I don't know how far this person will go. Then came the sentence that haunted me. But I know one thing. If I disappear, don't trust the person who tells you the easiest explanation. The recording ended. Emma looked at me. Mom! I whispered. Who was blackmailing David? I don't know. Did Dad tell you? No. Then we heard a car outside. Emma froze. I walked toward the window. A vehicle had stopped near the cabin. I couldn't see the driver. Then the headlights turned off. Emma whispered, Mom! We moved away from the window. Someone stepped out of the car. Then another person. My heart began pounding. Emma grabbed my hand. There's a back door. We quietly moved toward it. Before we could reach it, someone knocked on the front door. 3 slow knocks. Then a voice. Eleanor. David. Emma looked terrified. Don't answer. We didn't. David knocked again. I know you're both inside. Silence. Then he said, You've misunderstood everything. I shouted from inside. Then tell us the truth. There was a pause. Finally, David answered. I didn't hurt your father. Emma whispered. Don't believe him. David continued. He was trying to expose the wrong person. I opened the door slightly. What person? David looked at me. Then he said a name. A name that made my blood run cold. Margaret Lewis. The woman who had helped me. The woman who had given me my husband's documents. The woman who had told me David was responsible. I stared at him. Why would she want to hurt my husband? David shook his head. She didn't. Then why did you say her name? Because she's not the woman you think she is. Emma stepped forward. Stop lying. David looked at her. You know your father trusted her. Yes. And that's exactly how she got close to him. I felt confused. David, explain. He took a breath. Margaret worked for the financial company your husband was investigating. My heart sank. She had access to everything. David continued. She knew about the money. She knew about the documents. And she knew your husband was planning to expose the people behind it. I looked at Emma. She looked just as confused. David lowered his voice. Your father wasn't investigating me. He was investigating them. Who? David looked toward the road, then back at me. The people who were using our family business to move millions of dollars. I couldn't speak. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was afraid. Afraid of what? David looked at Emma. Because your father discovered that someone in your family had been helping them. Emma's face went pale. Who? David didn't answer. He simply looked at me. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about my husband. It wasn't just about David. Someone else had been involved from the beginning. Someone I had never suspected. Then David said, Eleanor. The person who gave Margaret access to your husband's files. He paused. Was your daughter? Emma stepped backward. That's not true. David looked at her. You were there that night. Emma's face changed. She looked at me. And for the first time since she arrived at the cabin, my daughter couldn't meet my eyes. I looked at Emma. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Emma? She remained silent. Did you give Margaret access to your father's files? Her lips trembled. Yes. My heart sank. Why? I didn't know what she was going to do with them. David stepped forward. That's what I've been trying to tell you. I raised my hand. Let her speak. Emma wiped her eyes. Dad asked me to. I stared at her. What? She finally looked at me. Dad told me Margaret could help him. He trusted her. I trusted her. Then what happened? Emma took a breath. 2 days before Dad died, he asked me to take a folder to Margaret. What was inside? Copies of the financial records. I remembered the envelope, the documents Margaret had given me. But why? Dad wanted her to verify something. What? Emma looked at David. David said quietly, whether the money was connected to the company. Emma nodded. He believed Margaret could trace the transfers. I looked at her. Then why did you blame David? Because Dad told me to. I didn't understand. Emma explained that my husband had discovered David had been hiding transactions. But he also discovered David was being pressured by someone else. My husband wanted to identify that person. He believed Margaret could help. But something went wrong. Margaret disappeared. I stared at her. What do you mean? She stopped answering Dad's calls. Then the next day, Dad became seriously ill. I felt a chill. What happened after that? Emma looked down. I found Dad's phone. And there was one message. What did it say? She whispered, "Don't trust Margaret." My heart dropped. But she helped me. I know. Then why? Emma shook her head. Because she wasn't helping you. She was looking for something. I immediately thought of the metal box. The original documents? Emma nodded. Dad's proof. David stepped closer. He hid them before he died. I looked at him. And you knew? Yes. Then why didn't you tell me? Because I was afraid you'd be next. I shook my head. I've been living with a lie for 8 years. David looked away. I know. I turned to Emma. And you? She began crying. I was trying to protect you. You should have trusted me. I know. You let me believe you hated me. I know. Do you understand what that did to me? She nodded. I thought if you hated me, you'd stay away from everything. I couldn't hold back my tears. You broke my heart to save me. Emma whispered, yes. For a moment nobody spoke. Then I heard a car approaching. David looked toward the window. His face changed. She's here. Who? He didn't answer. The car stopped outside. Margaret stepped out. She walked toward the cabin. Emma grabbed my hand. Mom, don't trust her. Margaret knocked. Then she called my name. Eleanor, I know what you found. I didn't open the door. Margaret continued. You've been told a lot of lies. David shouted. Leave. Margaret ignored him. Your husband left something for you. I froze. What? A final letter. I looked at Emma. She shook her head. Dad never mentioned another letter. Margaret smiled through the window. He didn't tell you because he didn't trust anyone. I opened the door slightly. Where is it? Margaret held up a small envelope. My name was written on it. But there was something strange. The handwriting wasn't my husband's. I noticed immediately. That's not his handwriting. Margaret's smile disappeared. I closed the door. David whispered, Good. Then he pulled out his phone. I already contacted the police. Margaret heard him. Her expression changed. She quickly turned and walked back toward her car. But before she could leave, police vehicles appeared on the road. Margaret stopped. 2 officers approached. She was taken aside for questioning. David looked at me. It's finally over. But I shook my head. No. He looked confused. We still don't know who was behind the money. Emma suddenly spoke. I think I do. We both turned toward her. She reached into her bag. She pulled out an old photograph. It showed my husband, David, Margaret, and one more person. I stared at the 4th person. My breath caught. I knew him. He had been at my husband's funeral. He had visited our home after the funeral. He had comforted me when I thought my world had ended. And for 8 years I had trusted him completely. Emma whispered, Mom. Dad discovered that he was the one controlling everything. I couldn't speak. Then Emma turned the photograph over. On the back, my husband had written one sentence. If anything happens to me, watch the man who says he loved me most. I looked at the name written underneath, and suddenly the entire 8-year-old mystery had a face. The man was my husband's closest friend. I stared at the name on the photograph. Thomas Reed, my husband's closest friend. The man who had delivered the eulogy at his funeral. The man who had held my hand when I couldn't stop crying. The man who had told me, "I'll always protect this family." For 8 years I had believed him. Now I couldn't even breathe. "Thomas," I whispered. Emma nodded. "Dad was investigating him." David added, "Thomas was the person behind the financial operation." I looked at him. "Then why did you take the blame?" "Because Thomas threatened me." My heart sank. He knew about my mistakes with the accounts. He used them to control me. And Margaret. She worked for the company Thomas was using. Everything suddenly began connecting. The money transfers, the secret documents, the threats, my husband's sudden illness, Emma's silence, and the reason Margaret had been searching for the original records. She hadn't wanted to help us. She wanted to find the evidence before anyone else did. But there was still one question. Why did Thomas want my husband gone? David looked at Emma. Emma answered, "Dad found proof that Thomas had been using the family company to move money through different accounts. He was going to report him, and Thomas found out." I looked down at the photograph. My husband's final warning suddenly made sense. "Watch the man who says he loved me most." Then my phone rang. The caller ID showed a name I hadn't expected. Thomas. I stared at the screen. Nobody spoke. Finally, I answered. "Hello." His voice sounded calm. "Eleanor, I heard you've been asking questions." I said nothing. He continued. "I think we should talk." "About my husband?" A pause. "Yes. Did you know he was investigating you?" Silence. Then Thomas sighed. "Your husband was a complicated man." My hands tightened around the phone. "Did you threaten him?" "No." "Did you take his money?" "No." "Then why are you calling me?" Another pause. "Because I don't want you making the same mistake he did." I felt a chill. What mistake? Trusting the wrong people. I looked at Emma. She was shaking her head. Thomas continued. "Meet me tomorrow." "No." "Eleanor, there are things about your husband's death you still don't understand." "What things?" He lowered his voice. "Your husband wasn't alone the night he died." My heart stopped. "What?" "There was someone with him." "Who?" Thomas hung up. I immediately called back. No answer. David looked at me. "Don't meet him." "I wasn't planning to." Emma suddenly remembered something. "Mom." "What?" "Dad's old phone." "What about it?" "He had a second phone." I stared at her. "Where?" "His study." We returned home with the police. The second phone was hidden inside the old desk. It still had enough battery to turn on. There were only 3 messages. The first was from Thomas. "We need to talk." The second was from my husband. "If you come near my family, I'll expose everything." The third message was never answered. It was from the night my husband died. "I'm coming to the house." I looked at the timestamp. 11:42 p.m. My husband had died the following morning. Then we found something else. A voice recording. My husband's final recording. His voice was weak, but his words were clear. "Eleanor." I started crying before he even continued. "If you're hearing this, I'm sorry. I should have told you everything. There is someone I trusted more than my own instincts." He paused. "Thomas knows about the accounts. He knows about David. And he knows about Emma." Then his voice became quieter. "But there's something else." I leaned closer to the phone. "Thomas wasn't working alone. The recording stopped. Emma looked at me. Who else? I shook my head. I don't know. Then the police officer examining the phone suddenly spoke. There may be another file. He opened the phone's storage. One audio file appeared. It had been deleted but recovered. He played it. At first, there was only static. Then my husband's voice. And another voice. Thomas, you should have left this alone. My husband's voice answered, I won't let you destroy my family. Thomas replied, then they'll suffer with you. The recording ended. Nobody spoke. The officer immediately said, this is enough to reopen the investigation. 8 years after my husband's death, the truth was finally coming out. Thomas was questioned. The financial records were recovered. The hidden accounts were traced. And eventually the entire scheme was exposed. Thomas had been using the family business and several connected accounts to hide money. David had helped him for a short time, then tried to get out. Margaret had been involved in the financial company but eventually cooperated with investigators. And Emma? She had spent 8 years carrying a secret she never should have had to carry alone. But there was one thing we never discovered with absolute certainty. Whether Thomas's actions directly caused my husband's death. The investigation found evidence of threats and financial wrongdoing, but there wasn't enough evidence to prove that he had caused the illness itself. And strangely, I was okay with that, because I finally knew the truth about the most important thing. My husband hadn't abandoned me. My daughter hadn't stopped loving me. And the family I thought I had lost was still there. Months later, Emma came to my house. She brought a cake. She smiled. Happy birthday, Mom. I laughed. This time, you're staying for the cake. She hugged me. I wouldn't miss it. We sat together at the kitchen table. The same table where I had once cried over her letter. The same table where I had wondered why my daughter no longer wanted me. Now she was sitting beside me again, and I finally understood what her letter had really meant. She hadn't written it to say goodbye. She had written it because she was trying to find her way home. I still keep that letter, not because it reminds me of the pain, but because it reminds me that sometimes the people who push us away are fighting battles they don't know how to explain. And sometimes the truth takes years to arrive, but when it finally does, can bring a family back together.